Yeah. Come on, you gotta say hi.
I'm gonna do the pee.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go.
Introduce yourself.
Patrick.
Patrick. Ali.
Hi.
That's fine.
Hi everyone. So today we're going to be talking about how perception works in the brain. Our brain is one of our most valuable tools in our entire body because it's the thing that creates our entire world for us. It takes all of our five senses and it goes in our brain, and our brain is what makes our five senses our reality, and it makes it as realistic as possible for us. How does our brain use perception, though, and what influences perception? There are five key things that I'm going to bring out today that relate to perception. There's a lot more things that do tie into perception, but I'm only going to bring out the five that stood out for me. The first one is familiarity. Familiarity is when you store memories in your brain, and then when you see something later on in time, that memory comes up and you know what it is and how to relate to the situation because you've experienced it before. The first example I have here is these two different boxes. The first box and the second box, they look like completely different colors. This one looks like a dark gray and the bottom one looks like a light gray, right? Everyone agree?
Yeah.
All right, so can I have one volunteer come up here? And oh, Patrick, you look like a good volunteer. All right, so can you take this little dot and put it on top of the bottom square? So as we can all see, those two are the same exact colors. It blends in perfectly. Now why don't you put that circle on top of the top square? And as we can see again, it blends in exactly again. So what's happening is our brain is taking this and it's turning it into something that's familiar to us. When we look at a square and we look at the shadowing and the lighting of it, we would see two different colors because of how the shading is. But in this case, since it's kind of playing an illusion on our brain, and if we block the two center shading areas, we can tell that they're both the same color. That ties into our next point, shadowing, because it kind of tricks our brain by the shadows. As we look at this basketball, we can tell it's a basketball. What's happening is that the light being emitted from this basketball, it's sending an electrical signal to our brain, which goes down our neurological pathway that leads to our visual cortex. And once it hits our visual cortex, then it shows, then it compares the basketball to different things in our brain. Like this clip is showing. It shows the process of where it goes through in our brain. It ends up in the visual cortex, and then once it reaches the visual cortex, it'll compare the basketball to certain things, like it'll compare it to a coffee mug. No, it's not a coffee mug. It'll compare it to a tire. No, it's not a tire. An orange? No, not an orange. And once it reaches the basketball, we'll relate it with something that's already stored in our memory, and we'll know that it's a basketball. Also, shadowing plays a really important part because shadows show where things are in space. And so if we look at this, it just shows the basketball going up and down. We don't really know where it is, but once we add the shadow, we can see that it's going up and down the basketball court. And also how we change the shadow can change the direction the ball goes. So as we see here, the shadow, it makes the ball look like it's going through the air. It's still going in the same up and down motion, but the shadow is making it look like it's going in the air instead. And if we change the shadow again, it'll look like the ball's bouncing, even though it's going in the same line, same direction. The shadow just influences it. And so that is shadows. The third point is perspective. Perspective, it kind of relates to shadows because when we see a shadow, we can know how close it is to us, how far it is to us, where it is in space. This next example I have is these two tabletops. They look completely different. One looks skinny and long, the other one looks short and fat. Can I have one more volunteer come up here?
Bryson.
Bryson, very good. So grab this We'll see if these two tabletops are the same size. Grab it and try and put it on the other table. So we see they're exactly the same size. So what comes into question when we perceive things is the angle that we're looking at it, the shadowing, everything will tell our brain where they are. And that can lead to a life and death situation, because if we're trying to cross the street, we need to know where, thank you, Bryson. We need to know where cars are, we need to know how fast and slow they're going, we need to know what direction they're going in so they don't hit us while we're trying to cross the street. The fourth key point to perception is motion. This next clip I'm going to show you. If you all just stare at the X, what do you see? You see a green circle going around.
Whoa.
But as you try and follow the circle, what happens to it?
Whoa.
It disappears. There is no green circle. So what's happening? What's happening in your brain? What's happening in your brain is that neurons inside your visual cortex, they're comparing the images in frames. They're not seeing it as one single motion. They're showing a bunch of different frames. And as you're seeing each frame, what's happening is your brain is leaving behind an after image. So that's what you're seeing. The green dot is the after image. And it's green because it has all purple surrounding it. And that's how we watch movies, too. We don't watch movies as one single motion. We watch it in frames, but our brain just puts it all together as it's moving in one single motion. And the last and final thing that relates to perception is sound. I'm going to show you one more clip, but just so you guys know, sound, the brain familiarizes noise. So just like we saw with the basketball, we familiarize images with images we've seen in the past. We familiarize noise with noise we've heard in the past. So even if it's dark, when we're laying in our bed late at night, we'll know what noise is being made. We know what sound the refrigerator makes because we know that sound is in our mind already. So if we're laying in bed and we hear that noise, we can know it's the refrigerator without even having to look at it. And just like the basketball, it goes into our visual cortex. The sound is converted to electrical signals that go into our auditory cortex. And our brain, just like with the basketball, compares it to noises we've heard. Now let's just listen to this clip. And what this clip shows is that most of our brain is dedicated to deciphering speech because most of our day is spent talking. We can't go a day without talking. We can't go a day without listening to someone talk. And so a lot of our brain is used to deciphering speech. And this clip just shows how deciphering speech is important and how what you hear remains in your brain after you've heard it. You can't ever unhear it.
And there's one unique type of sound that the human ear has evolved to be particularly good at deciphering: speech. It's a fact that McDermott wants to test with a group of volunteers.
You're going to hear two syllables that will be repeated over and over again. And what we want you to do is just listen to them and try to understand what you're hearing.
McDermott is going to play a sound for the participants. See if you hear anything specific in the sound. It's out with the light. It's out with the light.
What does it sound like? Science fiction.
It's out with the light.
Does it sound like speech?
Moving.
All right. So let's play a version of actual speech.
She comes with a knife. She comes with a knife. Did you hear that sentence in the garbled version? Most of the audience didn't. She comes with a knife. What's most incredible about your brain is that once you hear the words in the noise, it can be impossible to unhear them.
All right. Now we're going to play the funny version.
She's out with a knife. She's out with a knife.
Does it sound like anything now?
So that just goes to show that once you do hear something, it does go into your memory, and you remember that noise. So once you hear the garbled version of it again, you know what it's saying. You can't ever unhear what you just heard. So in conclusion, perception requires constant interaction between the environment and the mind. And it takes all of your five senses in order to create this reality between them. Sometimes our brain can be tricked, like in these illusions and with the motion thing and everything. But usually our brain works really well, and it provides a reality for us that, for some people it is different, but everyone it usually is consistent. And sometimes things can be so ambiguous that we come up with several different results for it. Like if we hear a certain noise, it could be the sound of thunder, it could be someone getting shot, it could be a car crashing. But that's okay, because even though we do sometimes have wrong interpretations of things, our brain does usually work really well, and it is a very reliable source, and perception is very important in that source.